Hello, 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 and welcome to Reasoned Live. Now, before I tell you what's coming up on the show, I just wanted to take a moment here to ask you to admire my bush. I think it's quite the force of nature. I'm sure you'll agree. It's a bit like a sort of 1970s porn set, isn't it? This sort of fulsome bush. But hopefully you like it. We've got the Reasoned logo now in this sort of luminous, what do you call it? Neon. That's the word I was looking for. So things are looking up in the world of this little room. I'm not sure my electricity bill's going to be all too pretty come the winter when Ed Miliband and Sir Keir Starmer have had their little mitts all over our energy grid, but nonetheless, we move on. And my friends, what have we got coming up on the show for you today? Well, where the hell do we start? I say this every week, but what a week it's been. Now, we're going to be discussing Starmer the pensioner harmer, his hypocrite. Well, he is a hypocrite in the extreme. I think actually he has been proven wrong on absolutely everything. He slagged off Dominic Cummings for being paid. It was a pay rise of £40,000. Well, guess what? He's offered Sue Gray, the one that did the Partygate report that did over Boris, who then he hired as Labour's chief of staff. She's got a pay packet now, a pay rise that you wouldn't believe. And this is from a woman who actually tried to lower the salaries of those within the advising element of ministries of government. So it's all kicking off, right? Everything that they've said and stood against, it's all, well, as soon as they're in, they've got their feet under the table. And, well, let's be honest, he wants some new designer shoes to pop on their kickers. That's what it's all about. And after this week, absolutely nobody can argue that Britain is not a country that doesn't experience two-tiered justice. We're going to be hearing what Thomas Dunn had to say later on in the show. He was arrested over comments he made on Facebook about Islam, and actually they tried to section him. I kid you not. They thought, right, he hasn't done anything illegal. Perhaps we can section him. I mean, how much more sinister can you possibly hope to get? Mischief migrants, are you surprised by this? They're making up a major arrest uptick. The Centre for Migration Control has put together the data. And by the way, this data isn't that hard to get your mitts on. Or rather, actually, it would be much easier if the Home Office actually compiled this themselves. But the Tories, let's not forget, had all those years to actually do this and force them to do this and never did, right? Because the Uniparty wanted to protect their migration consensus. And as I say, Thomas Dunn will get on to him and his Islam posts and why he was arrested. But let's introduce the panel now. So, who have we got? Well, I'm not in shot now. There we are. I'm here now. I'm back. Right, we've got Alex Armstrong. We've got Chloe Dobbs. There she is. And we've got Eunice on my... Are you on my right? Left?
Left.
Left.
Right.
My left?
Right.
Yeah. By the way, I do know the difference between left and right, I promise. I know where I sit in the political spectrum as well. Now, what did you all think of my bush?
Beautiful.
Thank
Bigger
you.
than I thought.
Very pretty.
Yeah. I've
Nicely
got a lot
groomed.
of filigree on the floor there. Looks like I've been trimming my bush, but I haven't. Anyway. Right, much to talk about today. Now, the first thing I want to actually discuss is a story that was out earlier this week. Now, Huw Edwards, of course, avoided jail over the child abuse images that he procured from a convicted paedophile who also got a suspended sentence. And he, in a court of law, it was completely exposed that he paid for this material, that he, then subsequently asked for more, etc., etc. And I just went through a little list. I thought, hang on a minute, right? I'm going to compile a little list of all the people that were banged up for, between a year and 2 years. So this man was arrested, I believe it's called Bradley McCarthy, and he shouted at a police dog, and he got 20 months in jail. Now, this guy, a dad from Newcastle, who was at the Sunderland riot, he got 2 years in prison waving a flag of St George while standing next to the police frontier. And then this guy, teenager, just a kid, he waved an England flag near a North Yorkshire Islamic centre. He was jailed. That's that man shouting at the dog. This man who is on X, who people will probably have come across themselves, he was jailed as well for posts that he'd made on the platform. And of course, probably one of the most famous cases is the case of Julie Sweeney, who was banged up for 15 months over a post that, admittedly, not a very nice post. Should she have been banged up? I don't think so. And she was a carer as well. So that's someone going without care, as well as her being banged up for 15 months. And you think, well, what could have happened in that court case, right? What would explain him getting a suspended sentence, given that we look through each of these cases here and we've got this woman being a carer, this man being a dad, waving a flag. Then this guy was also, I believe, a carer. This guy, I think, a father. And this guy's just a kid. He's just a child. And then you think, well, what could have been the mitigating factors that the court discussed in order to come to the conclusion that it did, that this ought to warrant a suspended sentence? Well, this was a piece of court news from inside the court. Now, Mr. Goldspring said there was evidence that Edwards, as in Huw Edwards, father behaved monstrously within his family. The Chief Magistrate said Edwards went to Cardiff University rather than Oxford or Cambridge. This contributed to him being perceived as an outsider at the BBC. And I thought, you duplicitous fucking bastard, how dare you say that? You know, many of us come from problem homes, right? My dad was a drunk. I bet you there are people watching this stream right now who can think of a million excuses they could make in a court of law. But to go and watch video content and procure this material of children being raped, and that be your justification that you didn't get into Oxford or Cambridge? Well, boo bloody who, right? And they talked glowingly about the mental health of Huw Edwards. What about the mental health of the child who has been raped so that sick, twisted individuals can get their rocks off to this content of a child being sexually abused? I was honestly astounded when I saw that rationale. Like, I'm no lawyer, but I can't imagine that passing muster were I to be a judge in a court of law deciding if there are mitigating factors involved. I was disgusted. I really, really was. I mean, Chloe, you were following some of this as well. How did you feel seeing it all? Do you agree that there is a definite evidence now of that two-tier factor?
I mean, absolutely, there is just no doubt about it. And I mean, I didn't really need any more evidence, to be honest, because we have had example after example after example over the past few months and years of two-tier policing and two-tier justice. Now, on the Huw Edwards case specifically, you know, I don't think you should just say, no, he hasn't got any mental health problems. I mean, the reality is that anyone looking at that kind of material is probably quite messed up in the head. And most people who do commit horrendous crimes, you know, I doubt there's any, or there are very few murderers in prison that are sound in the head, right? Crime almost always goes along with mental health issues. I do think that courts should take mental health into account when they make a decision about sentencing. So if someone has like a horrendous one-off psychotic episode and you know they do something that's fairly low level, then perhaps they can be excused for it more so than otherwise. However, I think that what is clear is that, you know, someone who has done something so horrific has been basically let off. I mean, I know it's not completely scot-free. He'll now have a record, but he doesn't have to spend one single day in prison. And I don't think you can use mental health to completely excuse it and say he doesn't have to receive any consequences whatsoever for his action. I think the fact that he's, you know, A, on the left, and be, part of the establishment, I think that has worked massively in his favor. And there's no way that you can say that you can put someone up in prison for 20 months for a Facebook post, but that Huw Edwards doesn't have to spend a single day.
Yeah, and Alex, I think there's been an attempt actually to, what I would say, someone that high profile who watches this content, and there are the Sun did an expose where they collected a whole load of people similar to Huw given suspended sentences that had downloaded and consumed something like 1 million pieces of this kind of content, and they were let off with suspended sentences as well. Now, the fact of the matter for me is that surely someone as high profile as Huw Edwards was, let's not forget he was the one at the very forefront of all of the coverage around Our late Her Majesty the Queen's departure from this earth, and to not make an example of him, but to instead say you're going to make an example of the working class that went out on our streets and said enough is enough after the butcher of these innocent little girls in Southport. Well, you make an example of the working class, but you don't make an example of someone who purchases and procures content that is so damaging to these children. I can think of no more bigger an example of two-tier justice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what this does is it sends a sign to other potential pedos, quite frankly, this is what we call them, pedophiles, pedos, whatever you want to call them, that this is acceptable and that nothing's going to happen, right? That's what this says. You'll get taken to court, sure, but you're not going to go to prison. You'll be able to stay at home and just not allowed to watch that content again. It's crazy, right? And this is, if we just strip back the heinous part of this crime that this man has committed, and you look at two fundamental things. One, what he is being accused of, looking at content that he shouldn't be looking at, right? And receiving that content from somebody else. You compare people being locked up for resharing content on social media, and you start to see disparity, right? One of those things, most people in this country would vote with their feet. If everyone in this country had a vote, they'd say people who reshared stuff on social media should not be locked up in prison. But they would say that a paedophile who was receiving and paying for images of child abuse should be locked up in prison. That is the fundamental problem. Our justice system is rotten to the core. The law, the guidelines, I mean, whoever wrote these guidelines themselves should be locked up, in my opinion, because they're doing a massive injustice to our once great country. Jim Davidson said this brilliantly. He said it's all fucked, and excuse my French, but he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Our system is broken. People are fed up with seeing headlines like this, and they should have made an example of Huw Edwards. And if this government had any balls, it would be standing up. We've only got Tom Tugendhat, for goodness sake, is coming out and calling for there to be to look at this case again. Keir Starmer's done nothing, despite being the so-called ex-head of the CPS. I mean, ridiculous.
And the Reform Party have called on the Attorney General to actually look at the sentencing and evaluate whether it can be looked at again, because it was just in the Magistrates' Court, which can only put in place a 12-month sentence. So if it went to the High Court, it could be longer. Not that the Magistrate Court even put in place a 12-month sentence. But Eunice, Neil Oliver tweeted this, and I thought this was interesting. He said, "Why are you more likely to go to jail for calling someone a paedophile than actually being a paedophile?" And I thought actually that summed it up pretty neatly.
Exactly. I think I made a video about this like a few months ago. This government goes after people that point out the problems rather than the problems themselves. And in terms of Huw Edwards, I think he got away with one. And the reason for that is that because he's on the political left. If it was like a right-wing guy, imagine if it was Nigel Farage or Donald Trump, they'll be given like a 20-year prison sentence. And you saw the same thing happen with Schofield. I feel like these people that are part of the mainstream media establishment and they are slightly to the left, they have the advantage of not being prosecuted to the degree that they would have been otherwise if they were on the right or if they were an outsider. So that's just another evidence of two-tier policing in this country.
Yeah. Vote Reform says on X, when will the Manchester thugs who attacked the police be jailed? And let's not forget, they broke a female officer's nose and left lacerations across her face. It ain't happened yet. How many weeks ago was that now? You're talking, what, 2 months ago?
Months.
Yeah.
Months, yeah.
So that in and of itself is a pretty damning sign. And then Sir Keir Starmer stands up in Parliament and shrugs his shoulders and laughs at when Nigel Farage asks Prime Minister's questions about two-tier policing under his watch. I mean, I just find the whole thing totally extraordinary. Some other comments. The fact of the matter is, people are saying that there would have been people that had known this, that he was dodgy and that there was an abuse of power. The other people saying this is, well, Sandra says this is shocking, paedophiles walking free.
I think this is also to do with the BBC. I feel like BBC had a part to play in this because he was the face of the BBC. He was the main guy in BBC. And I feel like maybe BBC, they pulled some strings because they didn't want their top guy going to jail for like a few years. And I feel like it's all, again, the establishment and the mainstream media corruption. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
The thing is these corporations, they will do whatever they can to brush something like this under the carpet, even if that means young kids being, abused and exploited. In this case, it's him just consuming content. But, I'm sure you can find pieces in other establishments of where, kids are actually being, kids or women are being abused, but they will just keep it as quiet as possible and make sure that nobody finds out because they're more interested in selfishly protecting their own reputation than making sure that vulnerable people are kept safe. And that's disgusting.
Of course.
Can I tell a quick story about this? I just remembered something. Can I tell a very quick story regarding this whole situation? So basically, I have a friend of mine. Obviously, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's super successful. He works for Google. I think he is a programmer there. He used to work for Microsoft. And we've known each other for a while because we used to work with each other as a bartender many years ago, like 10, 15 years ago. And he opened up to me one time and he said that he was actually raped as a child by his own father that used to video him and he used to sell the videos. And apparently, to this day, he goes and sees a psychotherapist. And the thing is, the guy is super successful. He's got 2 properties. He's doing well for himself. And I think he's the same age as me. But because that happened to him as a child, 20 years later, even though he's super successful, he's super depressed. And that's what it does. Child pornography, it ruins people for life. And the people that consume it, they enable that kind of behavior because they create a market for it. And I think Huw Edwards should be punished because he's a consumer and he's creating a black market for people to go and rape children, video them and sell them to people like Huw Edwards, which is absolutely disgusting.
So Eunice, I agree with you, and I think that's a really good point. But that's what I meant about making an example of him, right? Because he is so high profile that actually you show that people can't get away with this. Because now the message, as Alex said, the message that's been sent out is that you consume this content and you'll just get a suspended sentence. Don't worry about it. It's absolutely fine. And I think that's the wrong one. I mean, I watched a really good film on child sex trafficking. Alex, what's the name of it? It was a big American film. It was banned.
It was banned in multiple cinemas. I can't remember the name.
It's really good. No, it's someone else. It's someone in the comments is going to tell me what it is. But anyway, it's really good, and I would urge everyone to seek it out. But I watched it in the cinema, and I felt sick to my stomach. And the fact that people tried to ban it, right? They are enablers of this kind of activity going on, and this is what happens. Yeah, The Sound of Freedom, that's what it was called. And it's very, very good, so do seek it out. Right, I'm going to move on to... well, I was going to say less depressing issues. It is less depressing, the content, but it's not less depressing what's happening to our country. Okay, so moving on. The Home Office are recruiting. I'm going to reply. So the Home Office are recruiting.
You'll be straight into the fucking junkie.
I'm going to work for Yvette Cooper. What are you talking about?
So, are you sure it's not DEI?
Yeah, well, it will be.
Sure you can apply that?
I can tell them I'm trans. So the Home Office is hiring a customer service advisor. So you might think, oh, well, maybe this is the Home Office. Maybe it's passports. Maybe it's something like that, right? Customer service, you call up, you want to get your passport sorted. Maybe it's something in that department. Oh, no. Because it's at Manston, which is where the small boat people are processed. Now, I said customer bloody service, right? This isn't the call center of some mobile phone network. This is the actually processing those who have arrived here illegally,
Oh,
being prioritised for British housing and getting 5-star service from a primarily male and fighting age audience that they are, arriving from France, which I reiterate, I repeat, like I do every week, is a safe country. So they're hiring this customer service advisor, and I think it's on something like 30 grand. It was about what now some people would be very happy with that wage actually, and I just thought, bloody hell, like the language itself tells you of the sign of intent, right? That they don't care, they don't view this as a problem, an invasion to our country. They view this actually as we need to be kind, we need to be gentle. And then you look at their actual records. I'm just going to list you off a few things. 10,000 Channel migrants have arrived in 75 days of labour. So the total this year is now at 23,598. Over 100 more in Starmer's first 75 days than in Boris Johnson's first year in government. And I think that's a sign that they recognise that Labour will let them stay. They will grant them de facto amnesty. Of course, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, she can't list a plan. She doesn't know our arse from her elbow. And saying things like, oh, we need to smash the gangs isn't working. They've just hired this new Border Force fella, this chief of the Border Force Command, which they've said they were going to do for months. And guess what he said? You need a deterrent. Well, I hate to break it to you, pal, but the government that you're working for, they just scrapped what was meant to be a deterrent, and they don't have any idea for any other one. So some might be watching all of this and say, oh, Darren, you're grumbling again. What's the problem? Cheer up, my friend. It's nearly Christmas. 99 days, or is it 98 now, which scared me a lot. But migrants are disproportionately behind a surge in arrests in this country. The Home Office was criticised for refusing to provide data on the nationalities of those arrested, but the Centre for Migration Control got their mitts on the true scale of the crisis. They used sample-sized data from dozens of police constabularies across England and Wales and found that migrants are disproportionately behind the country's increasing number of arrests. In 2023, there was one arrest of a British national per 94 people. However, for migrants, that rate surges to 1 in 70. So the migrant arrest rate is 34% higher than that of the British-born population. So in Derbyshire alone, there's one migrant arrest per 46. The rate there is 127% higher. And in Nottinghamshire, it's 121% higher. In Cambridgeshire, it's 105% higher. You go through all these things where actually you start to realise that there's a significant problem. Between 2021 and 23, there were 369,000 arrests of migrants on Britain's streets. And then you think, well, I wonder where all these migrants are hiding out. Well, I'll tell you where they're hiding out. They're hiding out in car washes. They're hiding out in barbershops that you see on your high streets every 2 seconds. Your high streets are crumbling, falling apart. Nobody's on them. They're all going to big supermarkets or shopping centres. But for some reason, you can't move without bumping into a Turkish barber. You can't move without bumping into a car wash. You can't move without bumping into one of those vape shops. You can't move without bumping in London into one of those candy shops on a piece of real estate that costs more than a row of houses in somewhere like the northeast. You can't make sense of it. And it's because they're being used as sophisticated gang fronts to help. They did this in Wales, in a Welsh town, and used it to put through drugs worth more than £400,000 using these shops as fronts for that trade. Now, all of those stories, do they not, suggest that we have a problem. We've got a problem with illegal migration, people coming here. We don't know what they're up to. We don't know if they have jihadi sympathies. Some will. It's statistical certainty. More migrants getting involved in arrests. And the fact that there are people coming here to get involved in all of this. Like, I don't think these fellas here look like they, some of them may be second generation, but I bet you my bottom dollar some of them will be first. So we've got a problem. Eunice,
Mm.
do the Labour Party take this seriously enough?
No, I don't think so at all. And as you said, I think the money laundering operations in London are just out of control.
Definitely.
Because these people, they, set up a barber shop, they set up a vape shop. And when you walk past it, you realize that there's actually no one in the barber shop and there's no one in the vape shop. Yet they somehow have millions in revenue every year and they manage to keep their doors open for years and years and years. And of course, look, if you're an illegal migrant, you can't work. So of course you have to do crime. You have to do illegal stuff to make money. And what's the best way to do illegal stuff is to do cash in hand, to do set up money laundering businesses. And obviously it creates a black market. And then at the end of the day, it actually damages the British citizen because you created this whole big black market and ordinary people, hardworking people, they have to pay taxes whilst these illegal immigrants get away with murder. Some of them even end up going on benefits. Some of them end up going on benefits and they, set up these businesses on the side, cash in hand, and, they're driving BMWs whilst they're on universal credit. It just doesn't make sense.
Alex?
I don't think anyone in this country is surprised anymore. I don't think anyone's surprised that there's a connection between illegal migration and rising crime rates. If you put them on a graph, and we actually had the data, which, multiple police forces have been accused of not taking data down, which is why the Rotherham scandal is so difficult to process because, as multiple independent inquiries found, the police were too scared to be called racist to take down the data and the ethnicity of those committing crimes. But I don't think anyone's surprised. I think everyone knows what they can see with their eyes. Everyone knows what they can see when they read articles online. And it's typical Orwellian nature of a government like Starmer's, where they tell you not to believe your eyes, that you're all a racist if you see that. And I think it's a sign of the times where the public are so vehemently being lied to by the establishment and the parties that be, that they're starting to distrust their own eyes. That's how you become an Orwellian state. And I really do worry that unless there is a politician or multiple politicians that are going to stand up against this, that the battle will be lost.
Chloe, I just watched a video earlier from Inside Border Force, right, for one of those television programs, and the Border Force man asks this guy from Nigeria who says he's 16, still at school, and he looks about 30. I kid you not. And this guy says his birth date is 1990, and the Border Force guy says, well, you ain't 16, fella. And he says, sorry, I meant 2006. And he said, how did you get confused between 1990 and 2006? And this Nigerian fella says, oh, well, I'm here because my parents were murdered and money was stolen. Because his parents owed money or something like that, some Nigerian dispute, gang-related. And then the Border Force man says, well, I can't allow you here because you've just lied to me. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? You're not there to be Dr. Freud. You're there to police Britain's borders. If he doesn't have a right to be here, he doesn't have a visa, doesn't have right to remain, you tell him to sling his hook. You don't sit there and ask him for all and sundry for about his life so that you can tick off and make your life easier by passing him through with an asylum claim when there isn't a legitimate one there. So there is a weakness, a systemic weakness, and it's actually, I'd say it's poisoning the asylum and immigration system to the point where I no longer think that anything should exist for a period that I can't determine, but I would definitely stop everything right now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that video, but this person was clearly
Very funny.
This person was clearly an idiot to say 1990 and couldn't do basic maths. But for the people that do actually manage to say the correct birth year, it is super easy for them to get into Britain. They just say that they're a kid, claim that they're 16 or 17, because if you're in your 20s, you can just about pass as that, and then you're sorted, and you'll get a free education where you can go hang out with the kids as well. There was, as you said, there were a bunch of things that you showed there to respond to. I can't remember all of them. But you mentioned that they finally got a commander for their new border force. So remember before the election that Labour was saying, we're going to have this
Day one.
we're going to have this tough new border force command. And then I remember, I think they had a bloke, then he quit. Then I remember 40 days in, Guido putting up an article saying 40 days in, and they still don't have a commander, right? And this is in peak summer when the boats are flooding in and they've got no one steering the ship. Excuse me, a terrible anecdote. So they've got this new guy, and I looked him up on LinkedIn actually. And so this guy, in his LinkedIn bio, he's got a load of grammar mistakes, which I think already is a big red flag and suggests that he's not competent. But it does say, amongst the spelling and grammar mistakes, that this was the guy that led he's a policeman. He led the policing response to COVID-19. So I'm thinking, okay, if this is the guy who locked everyone up for sitting on benches having cups of tea, I'm not really sure I want him in charge of the Border Force Command. And then we also had an immigration minister just tell us that they are completely ruling out the possibility of ever turning boats back to France in the Channel. So that's the only policy that could have ever worked, and Labour have just ruled it out. So there's no chance of anything ever changing, I'm afraid, guys, at least under this government.
No.
Yeah, can I just add something very quick? Because my auntie is a lawyer and she's actually an immigration lawyer. And basically there are so many legal pathways that you can get asylum in this country. You can say, oh, I converted to Christianity, for example. And that almost works 100% of the time, because they say, oh, well, if you go back to Iran or Afghanistan, you're a Christian, they'll kill you. And, all kinds of different excuses, all kinds of political excuses, and people all over the world basically know this now. They basically know what to say, exactly what to say. That makes it impossible for the British government to send you back, right? And the laws need to change. And one of the ways we have to change the law is that we need to come out of ECHR. And also we need to change our domestic policy. As long as we are bound by these international, European and domestic rules, there's nothing we can do about it, unfortunately. The boats are going to come. The guy's going to say, oh, well, I converted to Christianity. My life is in danger. And legally, you cannot send them back, That will be breaking the law. So there needs to be a complete overhaul of the system if we're going to tackle this illegal immigration and just immigration in general.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. There's only one party that seems to recognise that throughout its entire parliamentary force, and it ain't the Conservatives, right? Because there are many on those benches that say, even Priti Patel said that it was a red herring, that ECHR wasn't a factor. Well, if it's not a factor, love, why didn't you stop the boats whilst you were Home Secretary under Boris Johnson? So,
and it's a very long, lengthy process, because you have to change the laws, basically. And then it has to go through House of Commons. It has to go House of Lords. It's going to be years process. And the thing is, the more we kick the can down the road, the longer it's going to take.
Well, you have to. What you have to do is ensure that because Blair put the Human Rights Act in force, which actually enshrined the ECHR onto British statute. So you have to get rid of that as well. But as soon as you say we're getting rid of human rights, you've got the Labour Party going, what about the terrorists? How terrible. And, the ECHR definitely is a very good friend of terrorism in this country. It just is. So when people, lecture me on human rights and all this other stuff, I think, whose rights are you talking about? You're talking about the rights of the girls that were raped in Rotherham. Are you talking about the rights of those little girls that were killed in Manchester Arena? Whose rights are you talking about here? Because I tell you right now, it ain't the rights of the people that I want us to focus on for once in a damn change.
Exactly. And also one last thing I want to add to this. Look, immigration, if it's in a healthy amount, is good. But I think this country has taken enough immigrants. And I always find that ironic. They always say, oh, well, I'm fleeing a war-torn zone. Okay, go to Romania. Go to Bulgaria. Go to Hungary. Why is it that all these migrants always want to come to Western Europe, to the best cities, London, Paris, Milan? They want to always go to the best cities. Well, if your country is war-torn, I get it. Fine, go to Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary. But it's funny because those countries don't take immigrants. Poland doesn't take immigrants, So they're smart about it. And as I said on your show, Darren, they see us as a soft target because they say, oh, well, if I could just go and say I'm a Christian, the British are just going to take me and they're going to give me asylum, and then I'm going to go on benefits and I'm probably going to get free housing, So, yeah.
Yes, someone they're pointing out in the comments actually about this amazing story from Israel with the pages and then the walkie-talkies, and Hezbollah have no bollocks now, but someone said, "Watch your vapes, watch your vapes." So now I'm worried. Am I going to blow to smithereens when I? But is Chi
Be
in the
careful,
comments
Darren.
party? Yeah.
Most ads coming for you.
Oh no.
Or maybe
Counter-attack.
Hamas.
I'm
You
a
never
friend
know.
of Israel. I'm a friend of Israel.
Just
I
don't put it in your pocket. Just don't put it in your
Oh
pocket. Just
God,
leave it on
it's
the
always
table.
in my pocket next to my penis. I'm gonna be a eunuch.
Yeah.
Well,
No
at least
72
at
virgins.
least I'll-
No 72 virgins for the Hamas
Well,
and
that's
Hezbollah
it. Yes,
fighters,
I love
unfortunately.
the pager meme saying shalom. But the fact of the matter is, at least if my bits do get blown off, I'll be able to apply for all those jobs through DEI. So
Yeah,
there are
true.
benefits to my bits getting blown off.
Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to Starmer's. He's living the life of Liberace. Now, for those that don't know, Liberace, very grand man with a big piano, wore lots of gold. And Sir Keir Starmer, I think, is trying to mimic the man. So this is the extent of the free shit that he's had as party leader. £100,000 in tickets and gifts, more than any other recent party leader. Let's not forget, my friends, that this is a man who stood up in Parliament and criticised Boris Johnson by saying,
The Prime Minister will be aware that he's required to declare any benefits that relate to his political activities, including loans or credit arrangements, within 28 days. 28 days, Prime Minister, yes. He will also know that any donation must be recorded in the register of ministers' interests, and that under the law, any donation of over £500 to a political party must be registered and declared. So the rules are very clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. That's incredibly serious.
yeah, well, it's not so serious for you.
well.
You know, exactly, yeah. So all this stuff, he stood up in the House of Commons, he said all of that. They were speaking about the fact that Dominic Cummings, as I said earlier, Dominic Cummings got that pay boost as a advisor to the Prime Minister, but then when Sue Gray gets paid more than the Prime Minister, well, guess what? Labour are silent as church mice. You have the fact that one of the stats that stood out to me wasn't the fact that Mrs. Starmer, Victoria Sponge, actually had 2 rolls of the dice for Taylor Swift tickets. She went twice, not once, but twice in hospitality. But it was this stat. I'll try to zoom in so you can get it on your screens. This here. Can you read that?
Oh, wow.
Glasses valued at £2,485. What the fuck are the glasses made out of? Solid gold. I mean,
James Bond.
yeah, I'm flabbergasted by this. I find it absolutely extraordinary. So I was struck by all of that, and Angela Eagle struggled to actually defend, who's one of the government ministers, and then. On the Sue Gray point, Nigel Adams had a list, who was a former government minister. He said £175,000 per annum salary for Sue Gray, cash for access for Lord Ali, who brought him all of this shit, £100,000 in freebies, parliamentary rules broken, free clobber, and those very expensive glasses. Robbing pensioners of a fuel allowance so thousands will go cold. Quite an achievement in his first 75 days, even for a greedy hypocrite. And I thought, yes, go on you. Robert Jenrick, one of the Conservative leadership contenders, said £20,000 pay rise for Sue Gray, £600 cuts for some pensioners on as little as £13,000 a year. Starmer's hypocrisy reeks, because Starmer had tweeted this. £40,000 per year pay rise for Dominic Cummings, £3.50 per week for NHS nurses. The mask has slipped. Well, I tell you what, the mask has slipped with you well and truly, and the golden glasses have slipped from your sneering, hypocritical face, Sir Starmer. But it gets worse, my friends, it gets worse. I found this absolutely extraordinary. Arsenal. He says, they argue on ITV The Prime Minister has been given a corporate box by Arsenal as a gift. Starmer will have to declare it in Parliament's register, which with boxes advertised as costing at least £8,750 a game, per game. Every single game that he attends will be worth that sum. That's almost £10,000, right? So that £100,000 figure will be insignificant by the time he finishes in the next 5 years. He's going to look something like, I don't know, Philip Green. So Tim Shipman said from The Times, he said, some previous prime ministers sat in the stands. The security situation may well be acute for Starmer, but politicians normally accept a seat in the director's box rather than a whole commercial box to themselves. Well, I guess Vicky Sponge needs somewhere to lay her fur coat as she's in there watching the game. And this is what the Arsenal box looks like. So he's got this whole thing to himself, right? That's Sir Starmer's box. And I thought, well, I remember a certain Prime Minister who was a fan of Southampton going to St Mary's, and he was pictured very much in the stand. Now, I've got a lot to say about Rishi Sunak, but you can't fault him there, right? He didn't demand his own box, maybe because Southampton would have told him to piss off. But regardless, the fact of the matter is, I think they're milking it for all it's worth. But they said they were the candidates for change. They're Labour Party conference, which is coming up in next week, at their conference, they're going to have slogans. They decided this at the political cabinet the other day. Change. Change. That's going to be their slogan. Change. Is that you? Will it be change,
Well, it's
question mark?
accurate.
As in, have you got
It's
any
accurate.
change? Come on,
Well, it's
pensioners,
accurate,
cough up.
Darren.
I've got coats, I've got bags, I've got glasses to be buying, I've got Arsenal tickets I need to shift. Come on, get shifting that change. I'm disgusted by the whole thing. He's a rank hypocrite, Alex.
Yeah, well, you nailed it with the change. They might as well put British pounds and become UKIP on top of it, and just say, give us your spare change. I mean, it's literally what they want. They want to rob you. This is austerity on turbo. I mean, even George Osborne couldn't have come up with these policies so quickly. I think it took the Tory government 6 months to start putting austerity measures in. But, you know, they are just typical champagne socialists who say whatever it takes to get into government and then show their true hypocritical colours as soon as they're in there. In fact, this Prime Minister's had more than any party leader has since the last Parliament, which says a lot about Keir Starmer himself. And then you've got people like David Lammy, who can't even wear a pair of shoes properly, and Angela Rayner, who wears bin bags for a dress. But also, let's not forget, Angela Rayner took money from Lord Ali too. She got money from Lord Ali to dress herself properly, and she still couldn't even manage that. I mean, they do say that money doesn't buy class, and that's quite clearly true. But, you know, this whole government stinks of cronyism. It stinks of hypocrisy. And I put my bottom dollar on the fact that this government will be out in 2029 on its arse, and it will be sent to the trash bin of history.
I'm more confident
Even
about
before
that
that.
now, actually. I'm more confident about that. But Chloe, what about this? Did you see this? Angela Rayner in 2021 tweeted, what right does a man who complains he can't live on £150,000 a year, by the way, that salary's gone up, £150,000 a year, and asked Tory donors to fund his luxury wallpaper habit, have to lecture someone trying to survive on £80 a week? Well, the luxury wallpaper habit was declared. Boris Johnson paid for it. He paid it back. It was declared and all the rest of it. All of this about clothing and glasses, and they're taking the Michael.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are such hypocrites. I mean, they think that we're all just going to forget what they said in the past. You know, we can, as you've clearly done here, we can scroll back on people's Twitter accounts. And, you know, I think there's... there is often the place for people to change their opinions on things. So I don't always like when someone goes back and says, aha, you had a different opinion 10 years ago. How dare you change it? But I really don't think that's the case. I think it's sort of, you know, they're very happy to shout at other people, but they don't expect the same rules to apply to themselves. Now, you know, clearly it's not just Keir Starmer that's a huge hypocrite. It's Angela Rayner as well, not just on this. But remember that when we had the breaching of lockdown rules by Boris and his chums, she was out there saying to the press, anyone who has broken the law, they should resign immediately. You cannot be in a position as a politician if you've broken the law. But then as soon as she was found breaking the law with all her houses and her electoral register and whatnot, and all the fire was on her, she wasn't resigning. The rule doesn't apply to her, apparently.
Mm.
Yeah, Eunice.
Exactly. You know, I call them champagne socialists, but also they are crony capitalists because they are just such lying, pathetic establishment politicians. Like they lie their way into power, and then when they get to power, they're the most corrupt, you know? And, you know, Keir Starmer for me, like, ticks all the boxes. He's a communist, and also he's like kind of a extremely corrupt crony capitalist because you know in communism usually one person takes all the money and everyone else is starving, and that's kind of actually what's happening with this government. And I just don't know why people still trust career politicians, establishment politicians, because they lie through their teeth all the time. I just think Keir Starmer has no charisma. I was watching him during the debates. He can't talk, and yet he's still got 10 million votes. I just don't understand what people see in these people and how they can be so naive to think that these people, once they get into power, they're going to do something for them. And now they're in power, you can see that they're doing the absolute opposite. They're getting boxes at Arsenal, they're getting pay rises, they're getting gifts, and they're just being hypocrites. And I just really hope that people wake up soon.
Absolutely.
Well, people didn't do it because they saw anything in him. Like we've seen the stats on this where people have been polled, and the huge main reason why people voted for Labour was just because they weren't the Tories. They didn't really know anything about Keir Starmer, who the guy was, or
but
what
then
he
why
did.
not vote for reform then?
Well,
I tell you what, the reason why people didn't vote
Starmer a bunch of Nazis.
party.
That's why they didn't vote reform.
Alex, what did you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was just going to say, I mean, look, people were fed up with the Tories because things had got bad, and people saw that things weren't changing. And you know, what do you do then? I mean, let's just clarify one thing. People didn't vote for Labour. Labour's vote share stayed and dropped from 2019. So there weren't new voters going to Labour. They were existing people who already voted for Labour. Nothing changed. What happened was the Tory confidence collapsed. And we're already seeing that happen this early on into this government. We're already seeing the confidence in Keir Starmer collapsing. Even Carol Vorderman's had to lock down her Twitter account because she realises she made a grave mistake. I'm seeing online constantly Labour Party members returning their memberships because this was not the government they thought it was. This is the Tories on turbo.
The SMG on YouTube says, I feel sorry for the Gooners, which is Arsenal, and I have to agree. You're watching that ugly mug staring down at you with his expensive glasses. Anyway, the Sue Gray cut Tory SPAD allowances. So SPADs are special advisors within government, and they advise ministers on, well, policy and all the rest of it, and media appearances. Now, Sue Gray cut the Tory ones, right? But as soon as she's got in, she's given herself the highest ever SPAD salary. Highest ever SPAD salary, right? And then they talk to us about change. What's the change? Again, change question mark? You got any? Come on, like Oliver
Obama
Twist.
said the same thing, though.
Please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah, Obama said the same thing back in 2008, and he said, "Oh, I'm the change candidate." But Obama was probably the biggest establishment candidate that there was, you know. Trump was actually the change candidate. But I feel like these career politicians, they always come up with these new slogans. Oh, I'm the change candidate. Now Kamala Harris is saying that in America. I'm the change candidate. No, you're not. You've been in power for the last 3.5 years, you know. And unfortunately, because of like the mainstream media, so many people are still so naive, and they fall for, you know, establishment career politicians, and that's just the unfortunate truth.
Right. So, just to reiterate what Alex was saying on them being a one-term government, I think that's more likely because his popularity is now in freefall. His polling has plummeted to an average below 30%. That's something that no new governing party has managed in over 40 years, according to a pollster called Pollbase Pro. So in just 70 days, Starmer's Labour is already under the 30% mark, and this is how long it took other governments to hit the same level in the past after general elections. So the 1993 Grey man Sir John Major, it took him 397 days to reach that level. The 1968 Wilson government, it took 664 days. The 2019 May government, it took 675 days. The 1981 Thatcher government, 676 days. The 2022 Boris Johnson government, 762 days. 2008 Brown, 1,082 days. 2004 Blair, 1,104 days. So, if Sir Keir Starmer's the heir to Blair, well, he ain't a very good one. And he is deeply unpopular already. And they've made a lot of stupid mistakes. They are just not very good at politics. And we were all told that they were, and that actually Sir Keir Starmer was going to, really boost Labour's chances and opportunities and be in power for I don't know, until I'm in a retirement home. Evidently bloody not. And I'm delighted to see it, I've got to say.
But it just proves everything we've been saying for the last, God knows how many years to be right. We knew, people who are in the political sphere understand that these lot are grifters. We know that they'll do anything for a bit of extra cash, and they're selling out their own values at a rapid rate. They don't even pretend to be conservative, but they tell you one thing and mean the other. And that is the most damning thing you can do in politics, because as you quite correctly said earlier, the public don't forget. And thankfully, this is all online. It's all online. It's not going anywhere. There's a record of this cronyism. They're going to have absolute field day, the public, in the next election. Field day.
All right.
Yeah, I think there will be a snap election. I really do think. I don't think they will make it to 2029. I will bet on that, actually. Yeah. I don't think this government is going to make it to 2029. I really don't think so.
I think the government will, but I think Keir Starmer might find himself.
But then we'll probably end up with better the devil you know, right? The grass ain't always greener on the other side. We'll end up with some Labour psycho in power, and I'll be in a gulag. But Richard says, remember, Labour only won 34% of this vote to start with. Yep. Exactly. Very good point. Right. Okay. I want to move on to Scotland. Staying with Labour, but I want to move on to Scotland, because things are happening in Scotland. There is a Holyrood election for the Scottish Parliament in 2026. There are local elections, obviously, next year. But Labour has fallen significantly behind the Scottish National Party, which is a bit depressing, to be honest, because I don't like the SNP whatsoever. After the decision to cut the winter fuel payment, you can understand that, right? Because a lot of people in Scotland, especially rural parts of Scotland, aren't relying even on gas, right? They're relying on other means of warming their homes, which are becoming more and more expensive. And a survey of voting intentions for the next election found that Anis Sarwar, who is the leader of Scottish Labour, who I actually view in a similar vein to Humza Yousaf, because he stood up in Parliament and gave a speech saying white people, and all that. So he's done the same. It's two cheeks of the same ugly old arse.
He word for word copied Humza Yousaf, basically.
Yeah, he did.
And so this poll has been conducted in the days leading up to the 10th anniversary of the Scottish independence referendum today. Today is the 10th anniversary. And it's suggesting that the SNP stranglehold on Scottish politics remains intact, despite Scottish Labour rising as a strong challenger. But, my friends, the good news is this. Look at Reform. So Reform are now on par with the Conservative Party. And what they say about that is, in a dramatic surge for Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party would equal the number of Conservative MSPs, underlining the scale of the challenge facing the new Scottish Tory leader. Analysis of the opinion results by Sir John Curtis, the polling expert and politics professor at Strathclyde University, showed the SNP would remain as Holyrood's largest party with 47 MPs, but they would struggle to form a government, even if they were to rely on the backing of the Nutty Greens, who would have 9 MSPs. Reform and Conservatives would each have 16 MSPs. So you become, with a very new political party, a serious political force under the Scottish system, which of course isn't first past the post. They have a PR mix of a list system. But I thought, who better to explain all of this to us than our very own John White, who is who defected from the Conservatives in Scotland to the Reform Party. And John joins us now. Hello, John. Can you hear us,
Hiya,
John?
thanks
Oh,
for
he
having me
can. He
on.
can hear us. Good. That's a start. John, you've seen this polling here from Opinion, which is in the Times.
Yep.
Where are you at on all of this? Are you of the view that Reform are really going to give the Tories a good kick in here, and that actually the SNP will be denied of an outright majority and actually unable to form a government?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the numbers alone show that, the Scottish Conservatives are down 15 seats, while Reform up 16 seats from scratch. That's kind of without anything happening on the ground as far as Reform are concerned yet. And I think if things continue the way that they've been going, we could end up in a situation where Scottish Labour and Anasawa need Reform to form that government, because obviously the Scottish system's quite a weird sort of
Yeah.
makeup, and I think it will all be down to that list vote in 2026. And I think it'll be interesting to see how many parties try and play that list vote in 2026, because I think that's the key to winning seats, especially where Reform are concerned. But more so other parties. I mean, the Scottish Conservatives usually rely on the list seat as well.
Yeah, and so John, explain to our viewers then, who might not be aware, what was it that made you make the switch away from the Conservative Party? How long had you been a member of the Conservative Party?
I've been in the Conservative Party since I think I was 15. Um, it's year after year, it's infight after infight, and nobody could actually tell you what a Scottish Conservative was. They spent too long hammering the message we need to beat the SNP without anything behind it, to actually show people in Scotland what the alternative to the SNP was. It's all one beating the SNP, and I'm all for that. But you need to put forward a credible sort of solution to make things better than they were under the SNP. The Scottish Conservatives just have no clue. They're sort of all out to get each other and more interested in sort of the party structure
Oh, they're
more than
absolutely
anything.
useless. I can't stand
Yeah.
listening to the Scottish Conservatives.
Yeah.
Jason on YouTube, John, says, is that guy from Glasgow?
Yeah, don't know
Very
if
much
that's a
so.
good thing or a bad thing.
Oh,
I was
it's a
going to say,
very
what
good
the
thing.
what was
Very
that?
good thing.
That was horrendous.
Oh,
That was
sorry.
horrendous.
So,
I
John, I
sounded
just
like
want to know,
Mrs.
why do you
Doubtfire.
think SNP is so popular in Scotland? Why is that?
I think in Scotland there's a weird situation where people. I don't think it's all about sort of what they believe. It's went from kind of people always voting Labour to always voting SNP without kind of anything in it. The big change obviously came at the independence referendum in 2014. It kind of politically motivated people, and I mean most people I know for certain vote the way their parents vote, and I think that's probably a big issue in Scotland.
Is it because they don't really trust Westminster politicians, so they want to
Well,
vote
I
for
mean,
it?
so just to kind of like package that, because John, I was up in Scotland during the independence referendum.
Oh,
and,
he
you know, I
lived
was
in Aberdeen, though, John. He's in the posh
I did.
part.
I did. Oh, I don't know about Aberdeen. There's
That's
the
a
Aberdeen
Tory
Shire.
stronghold.
Aberdeen Shire is beautiful. But you
Yeah.
know, so I saw it up there, and I saw this quite divided nation. Let's put it that way. And the problem that Scotland's got, in my opinion, correct me if you think I'm wrong here, John, is that the SNP, excluding the Greens, are the party for independence, as where all the other parties, I mean, if you combine them together, they would massively be a big majority against the SNP, but combined together, they also divided and fight each other. So the unionist voice in Scotland is very weak, and there isn't really a party where unionists can get behind. Is that correct?
I would agree with it to an extent. I mean, a big factor at the elections in the past couple of years has been tactical voting. We're having all sort of kind of groups trying to push this tactical voting. In actual fact, when you start to look at the candidates in these political parties, I mean, for example, one of the Glasgow Labour Party councillors voted yes for independence and still supports independence, but you've got unionists jumping at the bat to sort of put them in, to propel them into a seat to try and get a sort of unionist majority. So I think unionism in Scotland certainly could probably be doing with coming together. I believe some parties have offered to work together with other parties, but it'll come down to what happens. And I think 2026 will definitely be one to watch, because I don't think Labour will win a sort of outright majority in the Scottish Parliament.
So, John, do you think Do you think that Scotland should be independent, or do you think they should be part of the United Kingdom?
I think they should be part of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
I
I
agree.
was up there in 2014, well, 10 years ago, bloody hell. And it was horrible. It was divisive. An SNP councillor threatened to throw me down the stairs. But and since then, many other political parties have. But I wanted to ask Alex Salmond said that within a decade, Scottish, and obviously he would say this, right? It's predictable as night following day. But he said within 10 years, within a decade, that Scotland will be an independent country. People your age, John, do want Scotland to be an independent country. So do you think actually it's inevitable?
Personally, I'd probably bet I don't think it will happen. I mean, the media seem to clam up this thing that young people are all for it, and there's an outright majority recently supporting independence. But in 2014, Unionists were called the silent majority, and they were called that for a reason. There is, I think, still certainly a silent majority within Scotland, and even within young people. I mean, at uni alone, there's a few people I've spoke to who have said they would vote against independence, which, I mean, I was surprised at, to be fair.
It's because the nationalists are bloody mad, right? People are scared of them, so they just keep the views to themselves.
Yeah, and I think it is such a split. I think it is such a split, but I think it all does come down to the nationalists and nut jobs.
Chloe?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm no expert on Scotland, but I think I'd agree with what Alex was saying, is that, if you just look at that graph there and you put together all the parties that aren't the SNP, that will make up a pretty big percentage. It's very easy to just look at that initially and see this huge bar that says SNP and presume that everyone wants independence. I mean, they had a referendum and clearly it didn't happen. I think, John, you've made a lot of videos on this saying that Labour are basically exactly the same as the SNP. So as great as it was to get rid of them, you've still got another huge task on your hands to get rid of Labour as well. It's not like Scotland's out of the dark now. Now that Humza Useless is gone, so yeah, you guys got a big task on your hands, and I think it would be really interesting to see if reform does well in the elections that you have in this more PR orientated system, and they get a bunch of seats and they're able to have quite a lot of power there, if that will massively increase demands for a PR system in Westminster or not.
Yeah, I think it definitely is interesting. I think 2026 will show people across the United Kingdom how it can I was going to say how it can be played, but how it can work in a sense, because as I said, that list vote, I think it all comes down to that, and it'll be interesting to see how different parties try and sort of spin it into getting seats out of it.
John,
Definitely.
just one more quick question from me. There's a big thing that I used to hear quite a lot about the SNP, and they're called Tartan Tories, right? They're the conservative grouping in the SNP, so to speak. I see Kate Forbes as one of those people. She's deputy leader, I believe. What does an SNP run by Kate Forbes look like? Is it a more conservative party at that point?
I mean, I wouldn't say so. Kate Forbes has backed almost every decision the SNP have made in government over the past years, so I think, again, it's two cheeks of the same backside, to be honest. I think she might play this card that she's the more conservative or the more sort of serious one of the party, but, when it comes down to actual policy, she's backed them at almost every turn, just the same as Anna Sarwar. So, yeah, I think they're just kind of the same. I don't think anything will ever change in the SNP, but
no, the clowns change, but the circus goes on and on. And the fact of the matter is, right, they say, oh yeah, we need to be an independent country, while signing up to Brussels, which would mean signing up to the euro, which would mean losing more control than you would ever have under the Westminster system, especially under a devolved Westminster system. So the whole thing just doesn't make sense, right? It's based on complete inconsistencies that just defy all logic.
The funniest thing was when the SNP were first founded, they wanted to leave the European Union. But now they're jumping at the bit to get back into it. So, as far as I'm concerned, I think they're nut jobs. But people in Scotland have voted for them, and I think it's kind of up to every unionist to get out there and try and sort of change the narrative.
Well, definitely. And so we can all look forward, John, to John White, MSP, for the Party of Reform UK.
We'll see.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Come on, make it happen. If you're listening, Ticey or Farage or Zia, get to it. Get to it. All right, John, thank you very much for your time, my friend. We'll see you. Well,
Thank
you're
you
on
for
this
having
channel,
me.
so people can check you out. Thanks. Cheers, mate. Where can people find you on
Thank
social
you.
media?
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook as well.
Check him out, people. John White's the name you need. That's a very generic name, though, John. Have you not got a handle?
I know. No, I've considered changing it, to be fair. My Twitter handle is at John W.D. White, and I think my Instagram handle is at John White UK, possibly.
That's easy enough. All right. Cheers, John. Have a
Yeah.
good night, mate. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Cheers,
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Now, the other story that I wanted to talk to you about, and I realise I'm running out of time, is the Thomas Dunn arrest. I just want to make you watch this video. It's not very long. And get a flavour of what happened. Does everyone remember this video, by the way, where this guy was arrested?
Yeah.
Yeah, for what he had posted on Facebook, and they were quizzing him about it. So the Thought Police. Yes, exactly. So let's have a watch, because this is an interview with the actual man himself.
Communications network.
What? My name's Thomas Dunn. I'm 64 years old and disabled. I'm a victim of Keir Starmer's two-tier policing. I've been a victim of two-tier policing for 7 years now, and because they can't put me in prison, they try to have me sectioned instead. They turn up with a mental health team, 3 doctors trying to have me sectioned, just to try and shut down my freedom of speech. And this is where our country is now. Everyone's now afraid to even put a like on a Facebook post. They're afraid they might lose their job. They're afraid of what people might think. They're afraid of being called racist. This is all being used against us, and this is how it's being used against us. And if we don't stop, if this doesn't stop soon, it's going to be too late. Our country's going to be gone. Our country, as we know it, will be gone. It won't exist like we grew up in. It's gone.
Okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, it's a Facebook crime, is it?
Okay.
Right.
So we need to ask you some questions about that.
No.
So, yeah, you can watch the full video from Turning Point UK if anyone is so inclined. But that's Thomas Dunn there. And he's arrested for making comments about Islam on Facebook.
Right.
He was also arrested in the past for wearing a burqa. Hang on, Eunice. Is a burqa the one with the...
The full.
Yeah. That's the yeah.
That. He had that
basically
on.
Batman, yeah.
And he was arrested for wearing it, right? And he says the police helicopters turned up and everything because he was going into banks wearing it to make a point. Which, I mean, you say what you want about that, but it's quite funny. So they post an actual screenshot from one of the articles on when he was arrested. Maybe it's not in this post. Anyway, there it is. That's him. So anyway, armed police stopped man who changed into a burqa in Debenhams. So he was making a point saying, he says it's not compatible with life here in Britain. I mean, Eunice, do you think someone should go to prison and be arrested, harassed by the police, told that they ought to be sectioned for making comments like this, whether it be online or in day-to-day life?
Now, this is the perfect example of two-tier policing, because I actually gave a speech for Turning Point UK outside number 10, and actually Tommy Robinson shared that speech, and this is like probably 6 months ago now, and he probably got 500,000 views, and my speech was actually about Islam, and nobody came after me. And the reason is because I am Iranian, and I spoke against Islam in front of hundreds of people. It got hundreds of thousands of views, and people should check it out at Eunice Rocks on Instagram or X. It's there, but you have to scroll down. And it's just funny to me. No one came after me. Why? Because I'm Iranian. And imagine if a white person gave that speech. he'd probably be in jail right now. So again, this is an example of two-tier policing in this country. Certain people can say certain things, like women can criticize other women. People from an Islamic background can criticize Islam. But if you're white or if you're a man, then you're a sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, you name it. And it's just getting out of hand right now. So I think this is a perfect example of two-tier policing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Chloe, do you have sympathy for Thomas Dunn? Because, you know, what he is posting is definitely considered quote unquote controversial to the mainstream press, to the liberal media, and to members of parliament, the established politicians. So, but he has a right, surely, in a democratic society, to make these points, to argue what he sees as an incompatibility with British life. I think he's ought to be perfectly able to make those arguments. I mean, for example, Chloe, on this very channel, you weren't here then, but David Starkey was on this channel and he made comments about Black Lives Matter. And we both faced arrest for that, right? For comments that he made, broadcast. Free speech in Britain just doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. And I think it's going to definitely get worse before it gets better, if it ever gets better, because it's bad enough as it is now, people like this getting arrested for Facebook posts, but we haven't had these supposedly on the way Islamophobia laws put in place by Labour, which will mean that, you know, probably if you criticise Islam at all, you're going to be thrown in Islam. I think it's a really interesting point Eunice makes about the fact that, you know, he's one of the only people that can get away with criticising. Now, I haven't seen this guy's original Facebook post. I might vehemently disagree with what he has to say, and I might think that he's rude, or I might at least think, oh, I definitely phrased that differently. That was a bit offensive. I don't know what it said. I'd have to see it. But regardless, even if I don't like it, and I think that what he said was awful, as long as it was not explicitly inciting violence, which is the only condition under which I think it's acceptable for the police to get involved. You know, if he was posting saying, you know, you guys should all go out on the street and attack Muslims or something like that, that would be explicitly inciting violence. But if it wasn't, doesn't matter how offensive it was, he should not be arrested for it. These are scary, scary times. And I think once you lose your free speech, it's pretty hard to get it back. It only goes in one direction. So yeah. Worried.
And Alex, it's perfectly all right to say that you want jihad and intifada on the streets, right? Which is, you know, the massacre of Jews. It's all right to say that sort of thing. And if you post that on Facebook or Twitter, whatever else, you'll be absolutely fine. But, you know, post arguments saying that Islam isn't compatible with British life, and, well, you're fair game for either a mental institution or to be banged up by the coppers.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're getting to a point in this country where freedom of speech is just completely frowned upon, and it's a really scary place to be, where you have to worry: can I say this? Can I use my voice and say this? Of course, what Chloe said there is right. There's never a case to incite people to be violent towards one another. That never solves any problems. It just makes everything worse. But you should be allowed to criticize Islam the same way that people are allowed to criticize Christianity, Judaism, and Hinduism in this country. Why is Islam an exception? And with the new Islamophobia laws coming out, you'll see more and more people locked up for criticizing Islam, which is the scariest possible piece of legislation that could have ever gone through the House of Commons.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
And that's just going to make, because how do you define Islamophobia, right? Is any critical, would Eunice's piece, exactly, Labour can't do it. Angela Rayner stood up in the House of Commons and made a right tit out of herself. What's new there? But Eunice has done lots of, a couple of pieces for us on the Hadiths. Would he be criminalised? Would that speech be criminalised? Because Eunice is saying, let's look at the key tenets of Islam and let's look at what it actually says.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, are you going to prison, Eunice?
No, but also look at the examples of countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Look what happens in
Blasphemy
those
laws.
countries, and they try to follow Islamic law. And people say, "Oh, look, well, Dubai is a Muslim country. How comes Dubai is like?" Yeah, because Dubai doesn't follow Sharia law. You know, they made a conscious choice of moving away from Islamic law. Same with Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman. But when you see countries that are backwards, like Pakistan, Afghanistan, ISIS, Iraq, Boko Haram, they actually do follow the Quran and they do follow the Hadiths. And I just don't understand what doesn't get through in their thick skulls that, look, I'm not talking about all Muslims. I'm sure 95% of Muslims are peaceful people. I have family members that are Muslim. But Islam as an ideology is a dangerous ideology, and you should be able to criticize it. Not all of it, but some parts of it. Maybe same with every other religion, but especially Islam, because it's a very militant religion and it should be questioned.
Well, Eunice, I'm afraid to say that this is the last live stream we're doing with you, because it's straight to jail. Don't pass go. Do not collect £200. You're off to prison. Right, I just want to end because Chloe's got to dash off to record, well, not record, to get ready for, I don't know, probably rowing some great big Viking ship or something. Whatever these fit youngsters do. And I didn't mean fit like that. Please don't arrest me for being misogynistic or something.
That's also going to be terrible.
Collect a bunch of dog food from someone if anyone's really not interested.
Oh, right.
And then I have to get a bag.
Oh, no. Right,
My
okay.
exciting life.
Well, I did want to talk about the trans dachshund, but I haven't got time to speak about that. This is a little doggy that won this woman 600.
We can work through it quickly because this was
All
really
right,
fun.
all right. So
Yeah.
this woman here, whose name was Elizabeth Pitt, who's a lesbian social worker, she had said about this dog, right? She said the dog was meant to be a gender fluid dog, right? I kid you not. A social worker, a fellow social worker had said this, and she got hauled over the coals, this Elizabeth Pitt, for saying that actually, well, I mean, what? No. And they said that Elizabeth wasn't inclusive enough when her colleague decided his dog identifies as gender fluid. And they said that she questioned the dog's gender identity with a really aggressive tone. Now, anyway, Elizabeth ended up winning £63,000 from the local council for saying that the dachshund was not, non-binary or whatever it is, gender fluid. But it just does go to show the absurdity of the whole woke mind virus and actually how expensive it is for local and national authorities. But
it's genuinely insane. I mean, you just can't make this shit up. I mean, countries like China are getting ahead, training their kids to code and whatnot, whilst the rest of us all sit here arguing about whether a dog in a frock is non-binary or
It reminds me of that. It reminds me of that time where that guy got locked up for the gay horse comments. Do you remember that?
yes,
And
yes.
just because he was called gay.
This woman went through, I think, a 10-month legal battle, and I'm sure that had a huge impact on her mental health. That was very time-consuming. This woke nonsense. Okay, sure, she might have ended up with 63 grand at the end of it, but so many people, they get put through hell, and they get excommunicated from the communities that they are a part of. Nobody wants to speak to them. You sort of just have to start life from scratch just because of one little comment that doesn't adhere to woke ideology. It's just bonkers what it can.
I mean, to be honest with you, the face of that dog to me looks like it's saying, "What the fuck have you put on me, you silly bastard, to get this off?"
But the world has gone insane. So you can do stuff like that, but then if you question things based on facts, you're going to go to jail. And that's how insane we've got, So I just don't understand.
Richard says, "Did she ask the dog's opinion?" She's Elizabeth Doolittle.
I feel like we're incentivizing mental health disorder in the West.
Definitely.
We're incentivizing and people that speak the truth and they speak based on facts, they're the crazy ones and they're the ones that have to go to jail. But if you want to identify as a gender fluid two-spirit penguin and call your dog a gender fluid dog, that's completely fine. That's completely within your means and your freedom of speech and your freedom of expression. But if you speak against power, you have to go to jail. And that's where we are at this country.
I want to thank Kears on, is it Kears? How do you say that, Chloe? Can you see it on screen? Kirs. How do I say that?
Stop snapping, Kurs.
Kurs has sent us £10 on a super chat. Thank you very much, Kurs. And says, thanks for your great journalism, for speaking up week in, week out. We appreciate that. Please do subscribe. Please do support. It helps us keep going. And actually, it funds my electricity bill for the massive big neon bush that I've got behind me there as well. Right, I want to play this video just to see us out. It's very short, don't worry. But I think Ed Davey has proven that whilst he might not have political talent, he very much does have oral talent. Don't worry, it's not anything. It's not anything dirty.
This is free. Take a chance on me. Leave me, let me go and be around. You got no place to go if you leave that.
It's like a nursery.
I mean, it's genuinely one of the worst things I've ever
This is
heard.
free. Take a chance on me. Leave me, let me go and be around.
Oh, God.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just let the whole party, they are a bunch of clowns, the lot of them. They really are.
think, we won this massive majority. No, you didn't. The Tories lost, right? The Tories lost. You didn't win anything. It is not Ed Davey's massive political enchantment of the nation, right? It ain't a factor here. Get over yourself.
I just don't know who votes for Lib Dems. I just really don't understand why would anyone vote for Lib Dems. I just don't get them as a party, you know?
Basically, people that are pissed off with the Tories. That's what it is. But we're all going to vote for Reform UK now. Reform UK.
Yeah.
All right. Cookie says, that just hurt my ears. Yes, indeed, Cookie. I'm going to let you go and wash your ears out because they're no doubt bleeding after listening to Ed Davey's dulcet tones. Right. Good night, Alex. Good night, Eunice. And good night, Chloe. Thank you very much for joining me. And thank you to each and every one of you at home. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Bye.